Coming up in this set of weekly challenges, we first head over to Grand Valley Highway 1 with the American Clubman Cup. After that, we're going to head over to Alsace on the short but very awesome test course for the returning one make event. Then we head over to Colorado Springs for some off-road pickup truck racing before heading over to Mount Panorama in Australia for the race of turbo sports cars. And then to finish up this week, it's the World Touring Car 700, which returns once again, this time at Dragon Trail Gardens. But before we get into this video, I'm trying to get this channel to 70,000 subscribers. So if you want to stay up to date with everything GT7 and motorsport gaming related, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and of course turn those notifications on. Anyway, let's get to it. So here is an overview then for November week 1. This will end on the 13th of November 2025 at midnight wherever you may be. Now in terms of the first event this week then, it's Grand Valley Highway 1 Reverse and the American Sunday Cup 600. We then have a returning special event in the form of the Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40V 1 make. This time around though, it's going to be on-road at Alsace Test Course Reverse. We then go off-road for the pickup truck race at Colorado Springs Lake before heading over to Australia and Mount Panorama Motor Racing Circuit. This time around, it's for race of turbo sports cars, and to finish off this week, it's Dragon Trail Gardens on the reverse layout for the World Touring Car 700. Now in terms of your rewards for this week, there are some decent rewards on offer. For one event it's 100,000 credits, for 3 events it's 200,000 credits, and for completing all 5 it will bag you a 6-star roulette ticket reward, which again can contain up to 1,000,000 credits or some of the game's best cars. So let's get into the first event of the week then, Grand Valley Highway 1 Reverse and the American Sunday Cup 600. Of course aimed at pretty much any American car around a 600 pp rating, but once again this is not set in stone, but as always for me, I will try and be as close to any pp recommendation as possible and run the game on hard. My car of choice would be the Dodge Charger Hellcat. Now in terms of the event itself then, there's a total of 10 cars on the grid, 9 AI up in front of us over a 3-lap sprint, and you probably noticed this is a bit of a longer event for a first event of the week. That's because Grand Valley Highway 1 is rather quite a lengthy track overall, and of course it will take you a bit more time to complete. Now I do have to admit here that the American Clubman Cup 600 is just one of the weakest events in the game. That's because it's mainly stocked up with completely stock and standard American muscle cars, and unfortunately they are rather quite slow and won't put up much of a challenge whatsoever. Really the only car that you need to keep an eye out for in these events is going to be that Dodge Viper GTS. It's much quicker than the rest of the field and will go on to build up a fairly sizable lead over any other car, so that's the one that you want to be focusing on. It will pretty much always be running up in first place, so as long as you can overtake it and of course then outpace it, you should be all good for this event. It really isn't too difficult, and given the length you should be able to get this one done no problem. Anyway, that's going to give us our first tick of the week. In terms of the payout for this one with the clean race bonus, it's 67,500 credits, and of course we get a 100k top up with the bonus ticket. So then on to the second event of the week, which is the special event this week. That is the Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40V 1 make at Alsace Test Course Reverse. Of course featuring that absolutely massive incline. However, you can really take advantage of it here. In terms of the finer details for this one, it's a 5-lap sprint race with a total of 10 cars on the grid. Your specified car is of course the classic Toyota Land Cruiser. First place is 50k, second is 30k, and third is 20k. Your main rival cars are going to be a bunch of slightly modified Toyota Land Cruisers, but nothing too extreme. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. There's no damage on, and both penalties are set to off, so you won't have to worry about those during this event. Now of course my car of choice here will have to be the classic Toyota Land Cruiser. Now in terms of the event itself then, we're going to start this 5-lap sprint race right at the back and a fair while off of first place. Now there's a fairly equal spread amongst the majority of the vehicles here, but typically the first place car will end up getting a pretty big lead over the rest of the field. Now I do have a fair few slight upgrades, however I would say I'm very matched in terms of the AI opponents and myself, but what I did notice is the right hander there before it sweeps you up on that huge incline is perhaps the best place to make up a ton of time lap after lap. As you can see, I was just picking vehicles off left, right and centre here and constantly making up those gains on the lead vehicle, and in fact I would actually take the lead at this point of the race on the 5th and final lap, getting that margin down from first place and finally getting myself that fairly easy victory in the end. The gap just under a second. That's going to be our second tick of the week, and in terms of the payout for this one, 75,000 credits with that clean race bonus. So let's move on to event number 3. This is the pickup truck race and it takes place at Colorado Springs Lake, a very unsung hero of the off-road tracks for GT7 and honestly a fairly enjoyable off-road event. It's nice to see the pickup trucks doing what pickup trucks should. Now in terms of the event itself, you only have 2 car choices here and my choice would be the Toyota Tundra. Now in terms of the event itself, I do have to admit, whilst it is a 3-lap sprint, it feels like it goes on for way too long at that. Now my Toyota here, whilst it does have a few visual modifications and of course dirt tyres, is completely standard. Unfortunately, the curse of the GT7 AI once again will strike, with them being incredibly inconsistent off-road. Now the majority of the grid here just seems to go into a massive bunch, and of course at a very tight track like Colorado Springs, that means you're probably going to have to battle your way through considering the sheer size of these vehicles. However, once you get your way through a couple of the packs, you'll probably find yourself out in first place and building up a pretty large margin to the rest of the field. Again, they're just so incredibly inconsistent that unfortunately it can suck out the joy of this event. But overall, it's nice to actually use a pickup truck off-road, which is where I found my main enjoyment here. And of course with that, we're going to cross the line and get our 3rd tick of the week. Now in terms of the payout for this one, it's not going to be that great whatsoever. 45,000 credits with the clean race bonus. Of course this a day 1 event, but we are topped up with 200,000 credits. The 4th event of the week then is Race of Turbo Sports Cars at Mount Panorama. Now of course this released alongside the Ford Escort Cosworth, so that's going to be the main car that you need to watch out for here. However, with that PP cap in place at 700 PP, it's mainly going to be built up of kind of powerful road going turbo cars. So of course I would have to go ahead and match them during this event, so I went for this, the Porsche 911 Turbo S, which of course does feature 4-wheel drive and a ton of horsepower, especially when upgraded to 700 PP. This is typically a Le Mans grind car for me, but it worked just fine here at Mount Panorama. Now in terms of the grid, there's a total of 16 cars over a 5-lap sprint race, of course 15 AI on the track. Now the majority of the cars are fairly quite quick, however there's a main few standouts, and that's going to be the Subaru Imprezas, the Honda Civic Type Rs and the M2 and of course Escort. The main one that's got a lot of pace here does seem to be the M2. Now I don't know, because I haven't done enough testing here, if it's a 100% hit rate for all of these cars to be in the event every single time, but if you do see that M2 and it's not right at the back when it actually starts, it will probably work its way through the grid with relative ease. It just seems to have a ton of horsepower in a straight line, so be prepared for that thing to be moving through the field. But as long as you get yourself out in front of it and get yourself out in front of the Escort, the rest of the grid shouldn't give you too much of a problem. As you can see here, I built up a lead of almost a minute and did actually manage to lap one of the back markers. That's going to give me my 4th tick of the week. In terms of the payout for this one, 90,000 credits without that clean race bonus, and we do get our daily marathon of a 4-star roulette ticket. So the 5th and final event of the week then is Dragon Trail Gardens on the reverse layout. Now in terms of the event itself, it is the World Touring Car 700, so it's mainly made up of Group 4 race cars with absolutely no modifications whatsoever. Of course we do have a cap in place of 700 PP here. Now my car of choice would be the Lancia Delta rally car, which I find really does get the job done perfectly. Now in terms of the event, I do have to admit this is probably one of the weakest WTC 700 events. I just find that it's not very interesting, and honestly I barely remembered this thing existed. The only thing that I can really think of in terms of what can mess around with your actual race is going to be the weather. Now I ended up getting it really overcast to the point that it looked like it was going to really wet the track and cause a bunch of issues, but that just wouldn't be the case. I found that as quickly as the rain started to move in, it would just then completely change direction and just move away again. So really, unfortunately, it wasn't going to be a battle of strategy here. It was just more about pure pace. And of course, with this being a day one GT7 event, it does suffer from some, I guess, glaring issues. That's mainly that the lead car is going to be much quicker than the rest of the field, which in this case is the GR Supra, which just seems to have mammoth pace compared to anything else that this event fields. So my main strategy here was all about being as fast as possible. So I would box at the end of lap 7 going on to lap 8. I'd put a new set of racing hards on, since that's the only compound I can use on this car without taking it over 700 pp, and then overfuel the car so that I can run fuel mix 1 for the rest of the race, and of course hopefully get track position over the Supra. Now of course, as you can see here, just coming out of the pits, the Supra is going to just manage to get around the outside of me, but we're going to quite quickly get that position back thankfully, and of course from there, not having to worry about the cars in front of us due to pitting a lap later, we were able to build up our lead. So really the main thing you want to do is have track position over that Supra. The rest of the field doesn't really matter here, and of course that's going to give us our 5th tick of the week. It's 115,000 credit for this one without the clean race bonus, but of course we do have the bonus of a 6-star roulette ticket reward. So let's go ahead then and open up this week's rewards, starting with our daily driving marathon of a 4-star. Now there was some good rewards here, mainly 100k, a free engine swap, and the Group 3 NSX, which is one of my personal favourite GT3 cars. But unfortunately that wouldn't be the case, we'd end up getting 30,000 credits instead. Now of course for completing one event we do have 100,000 credits which we're going to add to the account, and then next up is going to be credits once again in the form of 200k for completing 3 of the 5 events. And then of course we do have our main one, a 6-star roulette ticket reward. Now as we can see here, this does field some of the best prizes in the game. We have an O2 NSX, a million credits, 500k, and a Peugeot VGT. This time around though, we're not going to get so lucky. We're going to take away 500,000 credits. However, that's still a nice boost to the credit balance. Now I do want to take a quick moment here just to apologise for the lack of content this last week or so. Again, I've just been incredibly busy and I've just had a few things going on in my personal life, so it was kind of demotivating, but I do plan to return to daily uploads once again. I also apologise that the channel members aren't listed currently. I am still in the process of updating that list, so I will have that returning once again on Monday. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend wherever you may be. Take care guys, peace.